Today's daf is daf Pevov. This is the daf for Tainus Esther, and we're learning now the idea of somebody kidnaps somebody. Three conditions before we charge you with murder. Number one is you kidnap somebody. Number two is you make them do some service for you, and number three is you then turn around and sell them. And we said that the service that they do for you has to have value. According to Rabbi Yehuda, has to have the value of a pruta, but according to Tanakama, even has very little value. For example, you lean on it. You lean on this person. Or standing and blocking the wind from bothering you. That's enough of a service to say that they're servicing you. And we also said that you're not, another condition is that you had to physically be koino, take out this captive from original home and bring it to your place. And we also said that you cannot sell it back to a member of the family, like the father or something. You have to basically take it away from the family completely. Those are the conditions that we said. So we're up to the Gemara here, Daf Pei Vav Amud Aleph, about 8 lines on the top of the page. Because the end of the Mishnah was that if somebody sells his own son, we said that's not considered really taken captive. Now, how do we know that? Why should it be any different if it's your own child? So we'll see in a minute. It says the Gemara, we actually had an argument. The Yochanan said that you are chayim, the Chacham said you are patur. And we also said we had an argument if you steal someone who's half a slave and half free, whether you're liable or not. If it was a full slave, you're definitely not liable. But if you're a partial slave, is questionable because partly free and partly not free. Now, if a full slave is unliable, then we had the Gemara question: you sold a woman for her fetus, for her child, and he said you sold the shivcha, but not for the shivcha, but for the child. What is the din? Now, l'chayda, we just said that if you kidnap a shivcha, that's not really considered, and selling it, that's not really considered a problem. So the Maggid Mishnah already explains that the woman herself is not a shivcha. You captured the woman, and you're going to sell the woman, but that the child should become, should be a user of the shivcha, but you're selling the woman herself as well. So therefore, she wasn't a shivcha. Okay, brought to Gemara by 8 lines on top of the page. Says the Gemara, if somebody steals his own son, my time in the say you're exempt. It says in the pasuk that if you will find a person who is capturing finding means that you had no relationship before and now you found prat lemotze. But if you're always there, a father to a son, that's not called kidnapping and selling. It doesn't come under that charge. In other words, you might be over Allah, but you're not chayiv misa. According to this, it says in pasuk, if you say yimotze means somebody that you had no relation before, and suddenly you counted each other now. So take another example where it talks about if a man commits adultery with a woman, and the expression of the pasuk is ki yimotze isha. You found a man committing adultery with a woman. So bull is baal is hochinami. So too ki yimotze prat lemotze. You're going to say the same thing there. That if it's a family member, it's not a problem. It commits adultery. So only ki yimotze, a stranger that you suddenly found each other. Ki going to buy plenty. For example, this house, the Shchichin Gabayu. Rashi said there was a famous house. They didn't want to mention the name of that house because there were distinguished people there. But one thing the Chachamim did not appreciate was there were a number of families sharing one house. And they weren't related to each other, but they were sharing, and the husband and wife and everything else. And, things can go wrong, even though it didn't. And it just wasn't conducive to run a proper home with seeing everything else. So that particular house, if anybody there had an affair, they must forget about being a family member. They were all very familiar with each other. There's no problem. So Abai said, I'm finding from the passage where it says, we're talking about how do we know the about 12 lines of page. How do you know that if you steal your own son, if you capture your own son and you sell it, you're not chayiv? Because it says, so Abai says, because it says v'nimtza biyadei. You have to find in your hand, but your child is always available. Interesting. So Abai said a din, and Rabba says now that Abai said this din, I can learn from here instead of arguing. He actually continues on. He says hilcha for hani mikil a teacher, master rabbanon or a rabbi teaches kimitzuyim biyadei. A teacher who sees his kids all the time. If he kidnaps one of his kids and sells them, even though it's an aveira, But you don't get killed because it's for nimtza biyada. This is not nimtza. He doesn't just find it. It was always there, always available. Interesting idea. Here today we say the opposite around. We say that the teacher is more liable because you're using authority, position of authority, and you're taking advantage. Says the Gemara. We had a machlekes. If you sell someone half and half, what's the status is? Tanan Hassel, we learned over there. Rabbi Yehuda says, that we learned there's 5 different forms of payment. One of them is if you humiliate someone, you shame. But by an evet, there's no shame there. Exactly. There's no shame there. My time, we'll see in a minute. We learn from Pasuk. My time. How do you know? Did Rabbi Yehuda? How did Rabbi Yehuda know that? Oh, Makro, we didn't learn out the whole concept of Baish. The pay of an aleph about 13 lines from the top. How do Rabbi Yehuda came along and said there's no paying shame for an evet? Where do you learn out the whole concept of shame of Baish? You learn out 2 men were having a fight, and one of the wives came along and grabbed a hold of the person's male member. The person's male member. So my time, Rabbi Yehuda, Amakra, so the pasuk, not so anoshim yachdav ishvach, 2 people fighting, a man and a brother, and then one of the wives came along and basically shamed him. You have to pay. Mishi yeshle achve. So when do you pay shame only to a person and his brother? An evet does not have any brotherhood. Because like Rashi says, amachamoy, they're similar to animals that have no brotherhood. Taser, that's not pshat at all, because in every gate, a convert also has no family. So then what? You shouldn't be paying shame for a game? Of course you do. It means that the children are not related to him. The Yitzchak Halotz are not his. Says the Gemara, Rabbanan, they hold that an Edved Kanani who is forcibly converted, who now has the status of Isha, Achivu mitzvahs, he's considered your brother when it comes to mitzvahs. What's the machlekes? The Mishnah Melech has a famous chakira. When we say that an Eved Kanani is chayiv and mitzvahs like a woman, we learn that in other places. We learn there's 2 ways of understanding. Now remember, he was forcibly converted. One way of understanding is he's converted. The Torah says that never ever you force it, but he's converted. He's a full-fledged yid. He's a mamash yid. But then we have a Gzei law. It says we're going to reduce some of the mitzvahs so that he has time to take care of his master. And those mitzvahs that a woman is exempt from, so is he. But be'etzim, he's like a yid, like a man. That's one way of learning pshat. The other learning pshat is no. Be'etzim, a woman, an evet is patron mitzvahs because he was forcibly converted. He didn't convert willingly. Navas, the Torah is mechadish. At least we'll give him the mitzvahs of a woman. And might not come in between the two if an evet has the issur of shaving his beard with a razor. Because a woman doesn't. But a woman doesn't have it because she doesn't have a beard. So if we say that an evet is like a man, but we reduce those mitzvahs, then he's chayiv for shaving his beard. Because a woman is not potter because he doesn't have it. But if you learn that he has no mitzvahs, only chayiv the mitzvahs of a woman, the fact is they don't have this chiyuv, so therefore he doesn't have it either. And that's the Gemara's discussion here. Rabbi Yehuda holds that an evet is not like a man. An evet is a woman, therefore he's excluded. Chacham say, no, Achab mitzvah is really like a man. The law just reducing, and therefore he's chayiv and boshus. Says the Gemara. Now I'm going to ask a question. Okay, so that's the svara. What's the logic? How do you learn exactly what the pasuk? Rabbi Yehuda, how do we dash exactly? Rabbi Yehuda says, you look at the pasuk, it says, if you steal a nefesh, may echav from his brothers, as if to say, what? That comes to exclude avodi. And then it says, the next word is b'nei Yisrael. What do you say? If it's echav, obviously b'nei Yisrael. Another miyat. That comes to, so the first pasuk, echav, comes to exclude avodim. The second pasuk, b'nei Yisrael, comes to exclude, what's the next stage? A half a evet, half a chaydim. And then, but it says mi b'nei Yisrael. That means amongst b'nei Yisrael, not all of them. There's another miyat. So we might what? Mi b'nei Yisrael, again, to might the same. There's nothing else in between. If the next step is a b'nei chayr, a full-fledged yid. Having miyat achamid, you have 2 miyutim telling you the same thing, and the rule is miyat achamid el rabbis. Whenever you have a miyat, double miyat, it always comes to include. That's why he says that chetzi ever chetzi b'chayr is chayiv. Rabbanon. May echav is lafuki avodim. May echav comes to exclude avodim. Like mashlu, they don't agree with him. Why? Like we just said, he's mamish like a yid. Just a woman comes to reduce, but he's mamish like a yid. So all you have is 2 miyutim. Bnei Yisrael, Bnei Yisrael, Chad lemuti eved, Chad lemuti mishchad b'chaydim. the miyat of Bnei Yisrael to be ma'id and Evid, and the Bnei Yisrael to be ma'id and Evid, and the other one is to be ma'id chetzi Evid chetzi v'chein. So there's no double up. Says as harder look at we know the punishment about when you meet all those criteria. But where do you find the law? Rabbi Yisham says a pasuk it says this, it says lay signet. It means it's talking about kidnapping and kidnapping. And Rabbi Yechon says it says in the pasuk avodah heim, and therefore yimachru keres ebed. You shouldn't sell them. So therefore we learn what? That you're not allowed to sell. There's two pies. You're not allowed to steal and selling. There's two lavim there. One is a lav of stealing, and one is a lav of selling. If you do both, you're chaymis. If you do one, you get a lav. Now, do you get malchus? We'll see more later. Talk about we learned. Lo yistigma. It says if it's lo yistigma steal. Beginning talking about even the Torah says don't steal doesn't mean stealing money. It means kidnapping, and that's what it means. How do I know? And then selling. After I'm going to watch it from a kidnapping, maybe he's talking about stealing. I'm going to say there's a general rule. Look at context. Context is very important. Learn from the 13 midas the different ways of understanding the Torah. And one of them is that you have to look at the context. What's generally context there? All other things. Murder. What do you get from murder? Adultery. All those you get punishment, capital punishment. You have capital fashes. Tanya another, but I say loisig noivu says in plural you shouldn't steal, but going to mama kasmadaber. Loisig noivu means when it says pasha kadosh noivu, there it means don't. It means there steal physically, stealing money. After we're going to buy money, we're going to pasha. That's what my kidnapping. I'm it again. Context. Say lamad mishoshe mizotroin v'leshaben. Double million. Mamelkav daba. What's talking about over there? Withholding payments of wages, so on and so forth. The daba b'mammon. Afkan b'mammon. We're talking about money. Why does it say there in plural loisig noivu? So interesting. The Ibn Ezra says over there that stealing money, the only thing that motivates someone to steal money is to sell it, or stealing objects is to sell it. So the person who's fencing, the buyer from these stolen items, is just as culpable as the guy who actually steals. Because without you, you wouldn't steal. So loisig noivu, plural, there are two people in every geneva. The buyer and the ganav. Now, there's two parts to this thing you've said before. You have to steal and you have to sell. If you steal alone, it's only allowed. If you steal and you sell, then you're chayiv mis. So interesting discussion. Itma we learned Eidei Geneva the Eidei. So you need one pair of Eidim, generally speaking. If you have one pair of Eidim come along and say, we saw Shimon kidnap Reuven, and then we saw him work with him, and then we saw him sell him. So then Shimon is chayiv misa. If these Eidim are found to be liars, then these Eidim will be punished. What happens if you have two groups of Eidim? One group of Eidim comes along and says, we saw Reuven kidnap this person. For that is a lav. Another group of Eidim comes along and said, we saw him sell on the slave market. We saw him sell it. What happens now? Do we say that this kidnapper Shimon will get killed, or do we say that since you cannot find these Eidim as liars, as we'll soon see why not, and therefore the Shimon himself cannot get killed either, because any testimony that has no checks and balances is not considered Eidus. What's the story? It will be learned. Eidei Geneva, Eidei Mechira, Benefesh, Huzmu. They were found to be liars. Chizki says, Ein Erogim. Why not? Because each pair of Eidim only said a half a story. The first Eid came along and says he stole. The second Eid came along and said that he sold it. Each one said a half a story to make up the full story, and to be chayiv and misa. And therefore, we have a davar v'lechatz davar. Pishnai made in Yakum davar. We have a machleik in Rabbi Kiva Chachamim. Rabbi Kiva says Pishnai made Yakum davar v'lechatzi davar. So therefore, there's no way each one. It's not a valid Eid. They couldn't have killed the person if they don't get moved. A lot is malchus, but we'll see whether they get malchus or not. We'll soon see. It depends. We'll hear. Very good. That's exactly what I'm talking about. We're going to discuss, because we have a thing called a lav shenit and lazharas Mrs. Best. And is it a full thing? Let's go to Ben Sarah America. There we're going to see that maybe it is a full thing. And then we're going to try to draw comparisons, parallels to our Gemara here. Now, Yechon says, Yechon says, no, I hold like a chamim. That Chatzit Davar also is considered an Eidus. Chizki says Chatzit Davar is not Eidus. Therefore, each group of Eidim saying half a story. There's no Eidus here. They know Hazama. And therefore, in turn, you wouldn't have killed. If two groups of Eidim come in and say that Shimon kidnapped somebody and sold them, you would not kill Shimon. However, Rabbi Yecha says, however, that the following case is not considered a half a story, where the Eidim Acharonim shall ben Seder Moida. But ben Seder Moida, there's two stages. First stage is the parents take the bezin, you only have 3 dayonim, and they give him a warning, and they give him malchus. The second stage is that they go to now a bezin of 23 and say that he stole money and he ate it. Stealing money alone is not enough. He stole money and he ate it. In the second bezin, then you got a full story. You got a full story, yeah. Now, so what happened? So here we have two stages. Stage one is the first group of bezin 3, and stage two is the bezin of 23. So there, the first group of 3 is a full story, because at that stage you're going to get malchus. It's a separate case. If it later on leads into a misa, that's a separate story. Right now, it's a full story. He stole, he ate, we give him lashes. So therefore, in that case, it's mamash edim. So Gemara, Moide Chizkiah be'edim acharonim shel ben Seder Moide shehud mushin are going to kill. Why? For the first one's really not that I have to say it. We say lahav kaisek banu. The first edim are there to tell a story. They're not telling you about the future. They're just telling you right now. We saw he ate, he stole, he ate, and in somebody else's house, and therefore we said last time Mishus Hachedim, so because he's not scared over there, and we give him malchus. So if the first group is a full story, then the second group is a full story. Then the second group is the first story, yeah. So the Gemara, so then the second group is basically telling you a full story as well. So when it comes to B'Sayir Meira, since the first group is telling a full story, so therefore each group is considered full stories. Maskora Pop Rabba is a question, so then I don't understand. Isn't it the same thing over here? Isn't it in the case of kidnapping? The first group comes along. So in the case of kidnapping, the second group is also full story. Why? Because the first group is a full story. You're not allowed to kidnap somebody. You won't get killed until you get to work and you sell them. But even if you don't sell them, the fact that you kidnap somebody is an aver, is allowed. Under Leisig Naivu, you kidnap. So the same logic you have been said later, the same logic should be by kidnapping. Full story. What's the full story? Because you're going to get lashes. Why'd you come to Bezin? If he's not going to get punished between him and Abishter, why'd you come to Bezin? You came to Bezin to tell your story, so something's going to happen. Now, consequences. What's the possible consequences just for stealing? Malchus. But not everyone holds you get malchus, because if it's a lav that ultimately brings you death, is a rule of tonight. But if we hold the lav shenitin lazharas misses bezin, you don't get malchus. Now, if you don't get malchus, then why are you in bezin? Where'd you come from? They say you kidnapped. That's therefore what? Let him go to the truth. Say al chait. So it must be you came to give him malchus. So are you going to tell me you don't get malchus? So if you didn't get malchus, what are you here for? You're telling only half a story. That's what Chizkiah says. Each one's telling only half a story, because you're leading up to the next part of the story, which is that he sold him. But even we learned the following: it can't be. We learned the nefesh huzmu. What happens if the only thing that came along and said was he stole a person? We didn't see him sell it. We saw him kidnap a person. And then the Eidim found liars. We don't know who or what. One of them says, look, the Eidim tried to give him malchus. Now that it turned out to be liars, they'll get malchus. And the other one says, no, there's no malchus here at all. And therefore, they get nothing. And who says what? We would say, to Stayim, it makes more sense that Chizkiah is the one that says loikin. You know why? Because according to Rabbi Yechanan, if the other Eidim come along and say that he sold it, according to Rabbi Yechanan, it's two different groups of Eidos. It's a full Eidos, and we're going to kill the guy. We don't say each one saying a half a story. So therefore, according to Rabbi Yechanan, it's a lav that leads into Misa. And a lav, you don't get malchus. So it must be Chizkiah who said, no, half stories, you get nothing. So he's going to get, so Chizkiah holds clear, you get malchus. So if the kid got malchus, started to sing a full story. If your logic is malchus is a full story, then the first group is a full story. And once the first group is a full story, then the second group is also a full story. Kasha on this thing here. What's Chilgam Ben Sarah and kidnapping? Killed. He get killed. He doesn't give you about half story business. How that allows you to be best. Like you get killed. So the guy himself doesn't get malchus because he didn't. I mean, because Allah should need to allow bezin. Hey, how can the get malchus? So therefore, the way you explain machlekes and then you said there was made by Ben Sarah, it doesn't make sense. Elo amar papa. The Eidim, when it comes to the second group of Eidim, Everyone holds that he's chayiv. If, let's say, two groups of eight, one says that I saw him kidnapped, the other one says we saw him sell, that group who came in and said I saw him sell, everyone holds that you're a chayiv because it's a full story. The first group said a full story. It's a different story. It's a full story. Because if the first group is considered a whole story, then automatically the second group is a whole story. So the second group is a whole story. He pligi be'eid. The only argument is be'eid gneva. Or they complete the story of the whole story. When they argue be'eid gneva, they're arguing gneva. What? Chizkiah says ain't nerogin. Chizkiah said they don't get killed. Why not? What do you call it? Because ain't nerogin. They don't get killed. In other words, they're talking about the Eidei Gneva came along to testify about Gneva. Afterwards came along Eidei Mechira. And then it turned out to be the Eidei Gneva were liars. So do we say, oh, 1 second, we were about to kill the guy and now you came along. But all they came was for Gneva. So keep pligi be Eidei Gneva. Chizkiah says, look, ain't not going to get killed. Why? Gneva l'chud kaima, Mechira l'chud kaima. Each one is separate. Right? The Gneva is on its own, and Gneva on its own, all they want to do is give Malchus. Because Chizkiah holds you give Malchus. So they can, according to Chizkiah, you get Malchus for Gneva. So therefore, they can, because it's not a lav shnitol horin bezin. So they can come along and say, we're a full story, Malchus, what do we get killed for? But Rabbi Yechel says nerogin. Why nerogin? Because he holds that's a lav shnitol laz horin bezin. Why? Because Gneva is chal to the Mechiri. This is the beginning of Mechira. But Rabbi Yechel is Moide. When it comes to Ben Sodom, how's that different? The Eidim Harish Shainim Shal Ben Sodom. Remember, there's two separate stories there. One is the first time he gets 3 lashes, then it comes a second time to another Bezin, 23, including those 3 original. Then you get killed. So Rabbi Yechel is Moide. Now, when it comes to Ben Sodom, the first Eidim will say, that and we're found to be liars. We had a full story here. This is a full story. It's not chila of misa. Here you can't say the first group came to kill him. We don't know that he'll steal a second time. We don't know he's going to steal a second time. It's a whole separate story, a whole different story. Therefore says the following thing. Three things. Number one, everyone agrees that's number one. I'll tell you in a second when. Number two, everyone agrees number two. And Machlek is the third thing, is an argument. Don't get killed. Everyone agrees that the first Aiden don't get killed. Because why? By Ben Sodom. It's a separate story. How come Ben Sodom they do get killed? Why? Because you're a full story also. The first Aiden they already took care of it. You got lashes. You come with a whole new story. It's the whole story. Everyone agrees. No argument. When? In the one story, they broke up. One guy said, I saw him steal money from the mother's wallet. And the other one said, but I saw him run to somebody else's house. He bought meat and he ate it. That's the machlekes. If it's chatzidov or not. I said, Eidim who said they saw him sell a kidnapped person or found liars. If all they said, well, they didn't say anything about stealing. They don't know anything about stealing. They came to Bezin and said, we saw him sell this person. Nothing happened. And they're trying to be liars. Nothing happened. You know why? But he can say, at that stage, they weren't administering Misa because he could have said, it's my evidence. I never stole him. I own him. And I'm selling him. What's wrong with that? Sorry?
They didn't know about the stealing. What was the news for them?
So Taisa asks the very question. So why are you in court? So why do you come to court? So Taisa says to give chizuk to the sale. As the Lashon Taisa says, lekayim hamekach. That's all. Nothing to do with killing anything else. Taisa has a question, but you know hasra. If you gave a warning, how can you say it came from the mekach? So Taisa says an interesting thing. A third party made the hasra. And these Eidim didn't know about it. They didn't hear it. But that's good enough because the person who sold it got the warning. You got the warning. And you were told that you're going to sell it, this is what's going to happen. And maybe that person who gave us didn't see it. Or he didn't see this other 2 Eidim, he's alone. And you have to see each other. And these 2 Eidim saw him sell it. Now you put the whole story together, we got a story. I'm gonna be basic. Come on, Oslo, how the Asi, who follows up Asi, that's like Rabbi Kiva Dama, Dava, Chatzi Dava. Rabbi Kiva says half a story is no good. I'm gonna buy you. I don't know what you're saying. And if you hold out a half a story, there's no story at all. Yeah, it says clearly here the reason is because he could have said I saw my because I have a story. Because there's no story at all. Because he could say, I own him. What do you have in time to me? I allow to tell him even once at Abanon. Over the loy also We're talking about a case where no Eda Geneva came. So according to everybody, there's no story here. Later on came along Eda Geneva. So what happened was group number one was the Eda Mechira that they saw him sell it, and group number two was they saw him steal it. The fact is, at the time when they said we saw him sell it, they had no idea that it was stolen. So there's not a half a story here. They saw each other, they were winking at each other, so it looks like they knew they were cahoots. I would have thought that Remiza winking is enough. There's no in a court of law, it's nothing. Even though Taisa says in other cases we do. It depends how much we see the winking and the collusion. Mishnah. Now goes the next one. Zakim Mamre. What's the definition of Mamre? I'll be better. Remember, it says, if let's say if you don't know the answer, there were three but they didn't in the base of Migdash. One guy saying how to buy is there. On the entrance of the Zora. One was sitting all the way on top in the wall itself, around the as you saw there was a hollowed out, and part of it was inside the basement, part of it was outside, and that's where the top Supreme Court, the top Bezin sat. Boyle is 71. Bezin 71. The low ones were 3, yeah. Boyle is Ashal Pesachar Bay. They gave to the bottom one. Boyle Rashi. This is what I dash and Bekach Dorshu Chaveida, and they disbreathed me in my local town. Kachli Madati, Bekachlim the Chaveida. This is what I taught. This is what they taught. Im Shamu. If they heard something about this law, on they tell them. If not, Boyle Lehem Loisha Pesachar. They go to the move up to the next one. And they ask him, if they're talking about it, they tell them, but they're all coming together. They all come together. It's the Supreme Court. It says, there emanates all the Torah. He goes back to the city. If he goes back to his town, he's defying the Bezdin. He goes back and he continues teaching in theory. That's not Azaka Mamre yet. But the lasses, if he goes back and not only in theory, but he says, guys, they're wrong and you better follow my psak, then you got a problem. Chayiv. Now it says, the Isha Sheyasa Bezodin ain't a chayiv, but Sheyoida says that Sheyasa. You have to have people doing it. It's not enough to say in theory, I disagree with them totally. You have to say, and don't listen to them. Do it differently. And we'll see in the Gemara later what kind of cases we're talking about here. What happened to the person was not really suitable to be a bezin? Rashi and Saita say, we're talking about a rabbi who's under 40 years old. A rabbi under 40 years old doesn't have the right to paskin. Comes out that what the chumrah that we don't accept him as a member of the bezin is actually helps him out, so he won't be treated like a member and he won't be killed. We'll stop over here. We'll continue tomorrow in Mitzvah Shem.